introduce you.
Thank you.
Not that you need any introduction. Okay, so shall we get started? So today is the second of this mini-series of seminars and workshops that have been organized for you to help support you in your thesis. The first seminar earlier this term was given by Stan and Hendrik. And recall the introduction of keywords and abstracts and how the abstract can be dissected to uncover the underlying intentions. Or as Stan said, it's not a bunch of mashed potatoes, right? And today, we're very fortunate to have Professor Essy Baniassad, who's going to share his considerable experience with us. And I'm going to introduce him in a minute. And just to remind you that on September 30th, there's a master class with Bing Tong, the architect from Canada, who is the designer of the Shiju Museum in the West Kowloon Cultural District. So today's session, Essy will speak first and share his observations on what is a thesis and on research methods. Then in the second part, Patrick and Kelly and Thomas, I understand, recommend to join in a moderated discussion. And our hope and expectation is that you would interact and really get the most out of it. Don't be too passive and try to engage in the discussion. And if you have particular questions concerning your own thesis, that's fine. Introduce those. All right. So Professor Essy Baniassad is a familiar face and figure to you in the school. I'm sure you all know that he was the chairman of our Department of Architecture in years 2000 until 2007. And prior to that, he was the Dean of Architecture at the Dalhousie University in Canada. While he was in Canada, the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, RAIC, as he was the president of it. And then after that, he was the chancellor of the College of Fellows. He's highly sought after for professional accreditations, assists a number of new and emerging schools, most recently in Africa, including University of Botswana. As many of you know, he teaches an elective course in the spring term in history, theory, and criticism. And on behalf of the school and myself personally, I'm very grateful to Essy to be here, not only to share the seminar, but really to continue to share his experience with our school, our pedagogy, and our curriculum. It's been a great help to me the last 3 years. So, Essy, thank you.
Thank you.
And hope you'll be listening closely. Thank you
very much. We will start. Forgive me for sitting down because I've got to operate this. And here, it's obviously an honor, privilege, and pleasure to be here, to have this time to share with colleagues. Myself, I think once you're in a school, you never leave it, even if you're not physically there. And I'm very, very happy and really feel honored to be able to continue my learning in the school. I do regard myself as a student. I feel as a student and act as a student. I hope what I'm presenting to you today is really a basis for discussion. There are 80, this is very loud. Do we need this? Yes, we do. Okay.
In fact,
you cannot fight the system, whatever it has to do. There are 80 slides here. I'm going to run through the first 70 of them. I believe you know everything I'm going to say. Certainly you know all the parts of it. What I will be doing is perhaps presenting them in a different arrangement. And so I will run through them quickly. Hopefully the thoughts will be familiar to you, even in their new arrangement, new composition. And hopefully there will be time for us to pause with the last 7. Let's see how we do. I thought it's helpful to put these slides on because then you could track the thoughts. Besides that, the documents can be produced in a PDF form, and anyone who wishes to have a copy of them can leave your email addresses. Actually, some of them I already have from previous encounters, but if you leave your email addresses, you can all receive the copies of it. And really, I would have hoped it wasn't possible for you to actually have them ahead of time, so that you could complete what is an incomplete record of what we're talking about. You could have your own notes and questions, etc. But with that proviso, let's proceed. It's not good to say that we will deal with the question, what is a thesis? Only a point of view, not an assertion. I'm sure that I don't need to urge you, as I would do, to look at everything that you see and I'm saying critically. That is to say, always opening a question rather than stating an answer. And I'll listening to it myself, I'll try to do the same. Okay, let's move on. You see the first slides, and you wonder why we are starting with that. Because I want them to illustrate this first point, that in every important work of architecture, there is a complex of theses. In fact, without them, the work would not have distinguished itself. That is, for all of us who know our history, and that is all of us in the room, the example of Gothic cathedrals perhaps is a quite clear example. You know, don't you, that in the 3 slides that we've already seen, there were a number of theses. The first one, the flying buttress. That itself could have been a major piece of work. The second one, the nave, the idea of the nave. And the third one, the issue of light in a room. Each one of them, lasting ideas as theses. All we need to remember is a lot of work that came after these Gothic cathedrals. And so that is a point of view I would like to present, that a thesis is embedded or it is demonstrated in an important work of architecture. In architecture, that's how it is. In literature, it's different. In music, it's different. But ideas are embedded in works. That is a general point that I'd like to leave with. So, would say as a conclusion to that, that the thesis is a proposition. In architecture, it's not necessarily a totally new thing, but a fresh definition of an architectural condition. I think this matter of the fresh definition is important, because things don't change, but we define them differently. That is to say, we see them differently. This will come back, and we will talk about it a bit more. And obviously, in architecture, we see that definition revealed in architectural terms as designs. A thesis is not a project as in a professional practice office. I thought I should say this because many of the thesis projects I have seen in many schools, including this one, appear to have been conducted as if they were a project in a professional practice office. That is to say, they are generally and extensively illustrated and developed. Every part is developed almost uniformly equal to other parts. That is not in the nature of a thesis. The second point I would like to raise that is that the thesis requires identification of significant needs, conditions, and ideas. No matter how we present the thesis, if we don't have these three conditions, then we really don't have a thesis. We may have a project, we may have a lot of work on the boards, but not a thesis. So the issues before us embarking on a thesis is this: number one, matter of identification. Second one, matter of definition. We identify a situation because we sense it. How do we define it? That definition is so crucial that it takes a lot of what we usually would call search and research. In order to define it, we may need to go to many other sources of information, inspiration, consultation, and a lot of research about these things actually goes into that part. How do we see the new problem? Let's say we are concerned about urban sprawl. How do we define that? We could define that in political terms. We could define that in economic terms, in urbanistic terms, in many, many, many different ways. That definition becomes quite an important takeoff platform for what happens then. And then there is, of course, the exploration through design. Let's share the next two slides. I show these because, in a way, assertively, they are an example of what I'm talking about, for right or wrong. Here we have only these two slides of something that is, if what I'm saying is correct, definitely a thesis. You know that the idea is identified. There's been a war, there are many, many casualties, many people lost their lives. We want to memorialize them. How do we do that? We want to honor them. Along that, we want to honor the tradition within a country, within a culture, within a world of human values that respects that sort of thing. All of that background by way of definition of what is going on. And we want to embody all of that in a work of architecture. How do we do that? Maya In does it that way, and wonderfully, it's recognized for its excellence. There were many, many submissions, much more complicated than this, with reference to memorials before Maya In's design. Sculptures, etc., all of them quite masterful, really. But here you have a thesis. I think we should bear in mind, for argument's sake or whatever, how direct and bold this is. Really, essentially just a line curved into the land, marked by two stretches of black marble. Now, I don't know whether too many people would be bold enough to present that at the end of a year of thesis studies as their thesis. But one should hope that people would know enough about the significance of these very few gestures to think, there is a gesture of genius, as it was said, and I agree, about Maya Lin's design. Now, what is the process that goes into that? What is the measure of the power of the thesis? And I want to go back to that one. And what is the measure of the quality of the results? Could we please bear in mind these three questions? And at the end, when we pause with the last slides, we'll try to see if we have made up our minds about possible answers. What is the process? We usually talk about that as research, but that's really too general a term. And what is the measure of the power of a thesis? And the measure of its quality? I show an example that embodies, that encapsulates all of this. We all know this word, the Roby House by Frank Lloyd Wright. This is the result of many years of work, searching work by Frank Lloyd Wright about the nature of a house in American culture. I repeat what we already all know, rather than go into it. So forgive me if it's brief. And therefore, the identification by Frank Lloyd Wright of what is the key issues in the idea of house in American culture. And then the exploration of it through well over 50 houses to arrive at the design of this house. If you go to Chicago, to Oak Park, and many other parts of that part of America, you will see the experiments. Each one of them a well-designed and built house. But certainly the peak is this one word. So there's a thesis, certainly not regarded by him as a project in its own stage. Yeah? Now, what do we do in search in order to begin our search for definition? My tendency is, and I would say maybe that's not a bad thing, is to bypass all the intervening works that are very important, but go to the origins. The origins are not a good word, the primitive, the prehistory. That is to say, before situations were defined in architectural terms, before they were in a way formed, primal terms. So we have a gathering. And if we want to be thinking about design of new places of gathering, my tendency would be to go to what you see on the screen and try to observe it. That act of observation is very important. What do you see when you look at this situation? Not the picture, this is just a picture. To remind us all, what do we see, how many places do we go to see it, how do we register it? Now we are beginning to identify and define, yeah, the condition. And then, of course, we go to many people's definition and formation of their observations. What do we have here? One quite masterful example. We are crossing many, many lines, yeah? We are jumping in time. But here's an example of observations and definitions of that primal situation. You may recognize that the architect behind this is Schinkel, Carl Schinkel. Very fine friend of ours, us architects. We are all working together all the time, regardless of whether somebody is alive or not. We are all in it together. So looking at this, we say, this is how he defined that circle. And then, that was a thesis by him, that definition, and then the formation. And here, we have a different definition of the same situation. How many of us recognize this definition? This is a definition that influenced our perception of Schinkel's definition and many, many others that went before him. I show these two next to each other in order to stress the importance of what I'm calling definition. How do we enact this definition? Of course we use words, but by many, many, many design sketches. I see them as a circle, I see them as a rectangle, I see them as a triangle, I see it in 10 levels. Define it, let's learn to define it by drawing. Of course we do some writing, but our primary language is drawing and model making. We are not writers. So if we use words, it's because we want to be very quick. And then let's look at some aspects of this. You see that plan. You can imagine how much it differs from Schinkel's plan for the Berlin Orchestra Hall. and look at this section. I don't imagine many of us in the room have seen this building. And if you haven't seen it, it's really not easy to imagine it. But just the complexity of that section may suggest that, oh my God, people are going to get lost in that. But actually, that is as close as one could get to that primal circle, getting everyone as close to the orchestra in the middle as possible. You could almost feel yourself as one of the players in the orchestra, in the center. And now, compare the section of Chagall's Berlin Philharmonie with the lower one, Jean Nouvel's section for the new Paris Orchestra Hall. They share a lot. We will have to see both of them in order to see whether Jean Nouvel advanced the definition, or he stayed with it, or he went sideways to it, etc. However, they're both masterful and they both contain a position, a thesis. I hope I'm making clear what I meant by saying a thesis is a position, and what I meant when I said to define a condition. Now we will take two more conditions and move on. The primal situation for the next condition, I'm sorry about this, is this. A child with the solitude that human psyche can afford, even in the midst of an urban situation, studying, reading, really totally internalizing the world. This is a total world of existence. It's not just a child in China doing her homework quickly. I spent something like 15 minutes to a half hour around that child, and she never looked up. And made many photographs. Fortunately, her mother was around, and I asked if I may do this. She said yes, but we never disturbed the child. And I thought, reminded me of a lot of situations of which this is the primal instance. One of those situations may interest you, because this is that same situation, except this one is much better recorded in history as the place where two people who many of you may not recognize the names of, Marx and Engels, used to meet in Baniassad in a library to actually formulate ideas which eventually led to the Communist Manifesto. If you're at all interested in that history, you may enjoy reading about it. The place where they were meeting is the Chatham School of Music, and this is its library. I will show you a picture of that library. Sorry, this goes too quickly. So there was the idea. It certainly observes that primal condition, but it gives a different definition, yeah? Here's a definition of that same condition, even older than that. In a Roman amphitheater, what you see in the back of it actually is part of the library. And here's another definition of it. You may recognize this one. Henri Robuste, the conditions for which were different. Many books were available by this time. Iron structures were possible. Robuste had already defined many conditions in terms of tectonics of wrought iron arches and walls. And therefore what you see is a very fine demonstration of that idea, the library at Saint-Geneviève in Paris. And we go on, times are changing fast, and we are moving even faster. And the conditions, the ideas of libraries are changing. Well, you can imagine the political history of democratization and increasing wealth, etc., etc. But here we are, just let's jump in time. But bear in mind that child on the sidewalk. And here in Seattle, we have Rem, our other very fine colleague, redefining the condition of the library and its relationship to the society. Essentially, what they're all doing is interpreting the places of gathering at the occasion of certain functions. You see,